Boxing Universe presentation.
When I was growing up, my mom had 6 kids. I was the second to oldest. I was one of them kids that really nobody wanted. I don't have no baby pictures. It was just one of them things where I didn't feel the love.
The life of a professional boxer isn't an easy road, but even fighters who have a team of promoters, managers, and trainers can still take their eye off the ball every once in a while. But those with no guidance have a far more uphill battle. To say Oshaquie Foster has taken the hard road to become one of the best 135-pounders in the world would be a complete and utter understatement. Born on September 17, 1993, Oshaquie Dominic Williams Foster, also known as Icewater, once inside the squared circle, has put Orange, Texas on the boxing map over the last 2 or 3 years. While his most recent defense of his WBC super featherweight title took place in Madison Square Garden in the February of this year, for those of you who are new to the story of Shaq, it's the culmination of one of the wildest and most treacherous roads that any modern-day champion has taken in recent memory.
Orange, Texas. Small city, but outside of football, nothing much but drugs and all kind of stuff infested.
Listening to Foster speak, you can hear the wisdom beyond his years, almost as if he carries a lot of his early life struggles and strife with him into the ring, wearing them as a shield. Shaq lost his mother to cancer when he was just 12 years old, and although he had contact with his dad, he didn't have a close bond with him, which effectively rendered him being raised by the streets following the loss of his maternal figure.
I lost my mother when I was 12. Me and my pops, we was cool, but we didn't have the best of relationships. I basically was trying to find some guidance, something that I can love, that cared for me.
Although his grandmother was there to try and steer him in the right direction, Foster drifted toward the wrong crowd and all the issues that usually come with it. With this lack of guidance, things spiraled for the young Texan quickly. He constantly found himself in and out of trouble with the law, including a few instances of pickpocketing from his coaches at his hometown King's gym, and consistently finding himself in offender institutions for petty crimes or more serious theft and vandalism charges. Although a young Foster first walked into this gym at the age of 8, he admittedly would go through spells that he would find causing mischief on the streets more entertaining than listening to his boxing coaches. Even with these distractions, the evidence of his skill set was clear as day to anybody who watched him. A double junior Golden Gloves champion and a laser focus on the Olympics in London 2012 seemed to have put some spring in his step between 2009 and 2011. But with only 8 boxers challenging for one spot at each weight class, Oshak was up against the absolute cream of America's next generation of boxing talent, and he showed he belonged there. Jojo Diaz was the opponent in the opposite corner for the biggest fight of young Oshak's life. But having already battled on the streets and with the sad loss of his mother and a tough life on the streets, Foster felt mentally prepared beyond his years for the biggest night of his blossoming amateur career. The then Houston Golden Gloves champion lost to Diaz by an agonizing 3 points, 17-14, and his hopes of going to London were dashed. That was the first of 2 devastating blows for Shaq, the second being his hometown gym in Orange closing its doors, all within the space of 12 months.
We lost our gym in 2011, right when I got out the Olympic trial. I really didn't have nowhere to go other than the streets. It's just getting away from them outside influences and the outside noise.
For Foster, this felt like another sanctuary was unexpectedly removed from his life. Despite this complex relationship with King's Gym and the coaches who worked so hard to turn Foster into the top fighter he is today, the penny did not drop for him until he was in his mid-20s. There was a burning furnace inside him, wanting to get out of his hometown, and he knew that boxing was his ticket, even back then. Yet he did not set up shop in another part of Texas or try to set up with another gym. He was still being pulled like a magnet to the rougher parts of his hometown. Average fighters do not get a whisker away from making the U.S. Olympic team, but following the razor-thin loss to Diaz, it didn't make sense for the then 18-year-old Foster to hang around in the unpaid ranks for another 4 years, looking for the opportunity to travel to Rio 2016, especially when he was struggling to make ends meet. he wanted to test himself in the paid ranks. However, the lure of the streets continued to be his most formidable foe.
Coming out of the Olympic trials, I didn't have a lot of promoters coming after me. The 2 losses I suffered early in my career, it was basically from a lack of focus. I really didn't know my future in the sport.
For many of the top names in American boxing, having such a close shave in the amateurs is an almost ironclad guarantee that you'll be able to reach the higher echelons of the professional game. So it's crazy to think it's taken him over a decade to rise to the top of the sport. And crazier still that he actually managed to make it despite all of these huge barriers that other fighters don't have to face, and that many talented fighters never actually overcome.
What you gonna do? You know, you gonna be old man saying that you coulda, woulda, shoulda been. Just not wanting to let my potential go to waste, and just wanted to try to give it all I got.
This journey has been studded with drug problems, prison, and with the most tremendous respect, a couple of losses against limited opposition. Essentially fighters that boxers with the skill set and natural ability Foster has shouldn't be losing to. Despite Oshaquie's best attempts, he did not derail his plans or scupper his potential, even if he perhaps realized it later than he would have liked. Any boxer who wins multiple national amateur championships and comes so close to the U.S. Olympic team selection clearly has immense ability. But after turning professional, Foster found his unstable gym situation in his hometown and the temptation of the streets a significant temptation which he could not resist. Madison Square Garden is a far cry from the regional fairgrounds where he made his debut in 2012. Without this set routine of King's Gym to keep him on the straight and narrow, Foster again found himself dragged into a life of drugs, frustration, and prison, all the while knowing deep down he had what it takes to win a world title. Between 2012 and 2015, Foster fought sporadically, fighting in a string of uninspiring 4-rounders, his progress slowly dwindling and losing momentum. Dipping his toe in and out of the sport, focusing on the wrong things in life, and training in a warehouse are not ideal conditions for a budding professional. Given all these components, it's no surprise that his first loss was on the horizon. Many fighters are too proud for their own good, and you'll hear a litany of excuses about why they've lost. This was certainly the view of Shaq and his management team when he chalked up his first loss via an 8-round decision on a cold November night in Las Vegas, in a ring that, for some reason, was outside. Fighting in the November cold of the Las Vegas desert is probably not the ideal setting for any professional fighter.
Yeah, they had us fighting outside in Las Vegas like the end of November. I was really still just trying to balance the streets and trying to box at the same time. We didn't have no gym. We was just training in a warehouse.
However, with the rival promoter coming into his changing room 30 minutes before the fight, reportedly threatening to pull him off the bill if he didn't enter some sort of promotional agreement with him, and having to deal with the gang-related homicide of his cousin in the same week, we say Foster definitely has a case for not firing on full cylinders for that first loss.
I wasn't ready, but you know, I wasn't even, I fought at 140 for that fight, and it was all kind of things that I did wrong.
As he entered his mid-20s, Foster was increasingly in danger of flushing his ability down the toilet. The permanent presence of the streets and prison continued to blight his boxing career development, and his nonchalant approach to training was again exposed in the ring when he suffered his second points loss in 4 fights to another unknown quantity. Both of his losses can be attributed to a period in his life when he was immersed in this lifestyle, not taking training or health seriously, and frequenting undesirable places with even less desirable people, which is something he admits.
That second loss, that Monday, my cousin, rest in peace to him, he had got shot. He was one of my closest people to growing up. So when I went into the fight, I really didn't even want to be there.
However, in a sport where your zero is considered a significant marketing tool, as is staying away from drugs and prison ideally, Foster soon found himself out of favor with promoters. With nowhere to go, feeling like he had run out of chances and a rather unflattering record of 10 wins and 2 losses, he again drifted toward prison and crime in 2016, 4 years into his then non-starter of a pro career. Following his second loss in 4 fights, Foster soon became totally entrenched in the streets. His grandmother had passed away, and friends would turn their back on him as he was consistently in and out of jail and bringing a lot of trouble to the doors of the people around him. He did not fight again for 17 months. But with a much stiffer sentence of 10 to 15 years in jail potentially hanging over his head this time around, despite only being 24 years of age, it truly started to feel like a last-chance saloon for the young Texan, who was squandering all of his God-given talents.
I just had fell out of love with the sport for a while, and I always knew I had the talent and the confidence in what I could do, but I knew I needed the right team, I knew I needed the right situation. And
his light bulb moment came during his last stint in jail 7 years ago, when he watched the now pound-for-pound king Terrence "Bud" Crawford unify the division against Julius Indongo. Foster knew that he, too, like Bud, had displayed excellent amateur pedigree and didn't receive the accolades, respect, or chances that his skills deserved. Many believe this marked the true beginning of Foster's career. Focused and determined to make a name for himself, he washed his hands of those that had held him back for so long in his hometown. And despite being homeless and living in FEMA rooms after his last release from prison, his old manager was there to help him out, guiding him back through the professional ranks and linking him up with the right people and setting him up in Houston, which is where he now fights out of. It's remarkable to watch Foster's rise, outboxing top world-level names like Ray Vargas and a Rocky Balboa-style final round knockout against Eduardo Hernandez in 2023 to retain his WBC title in Hernandez's backyard. Shaq's story is one of the most inspiring in the sport today. Not only is he one of the top names at super featherweight with a string of fantastic wins under his belt, but he is now ready to unify in a multi-million-dollar fight against other champions at 135 like Joe Cordina or Navarrete and set himself up financially for life. It goes to show that even with such difficulty and such hardship, character and talent can shine through as long as the desire never truly disappears.
Oshaquie Foster's a massively underrated fighter, tremendous skill set.
Check out some of our other videos here at the Boxing Universe, and be sure to like and subscribe for fresh content every week on classic throwback fighters as well as modern day champions.